Hi there, this is Fareed El-Wiley. I have another video I just put out called Manifesto for Humanity, where I read the manifesto. This video is going to be an explanation of the various thoughts in that manifesto and the reasoning behind them. It'll be much longer, but I hope you find it useful. I am starting with an assumption that we will be living with robots that surpass humans in performing all tasks. I don't particularly want to argue for that position. I just want to point out that a lot of people do argue for that position. There's back and forth about it, and we really don't know. 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, this may well be true. And if it is true, it's an existential threat because we have no idea what our position in the world is if we're living among robots that are much smarter than us, much more capable than us, doing everything and making long-term decisions about their destiny and about our destiny that we don't even understand. So I start by listing the assumptions here and their implications. And then I talk about how we can be redeemed. And the first thing to talk about is that intelligent robots will arrive at a time in the future where they surpass humans in performing all tasks. So today, factory robots outperform humans in factories. Robot intelligence is the key to have this working. They have cameras, they have arms, and they have a large AI, with artificial intelligence algorithm behind them that enable them to do these tasks. Now, we take it for granted that robots can do this. They can replace menial labor. But the truth is, that's not the only thing they can do. ChatGPT is a AI machine. It's from OpenAI, and it masquerades as a chatbot in the sense that you can have a discussion with it, and the goal is to feel like you're chatting with another human being. Now, the training for this thing was from the internet, so it had the whole database of the internet to kind of learn a lot about humans, about our place in the world, and we can have pretty interesting discussions with it. More interesting to me is that it learned from that, in fact, how programs are written. So programmers are getting online and saying they've asked it to write a program. And it turns out it can write simple programs faster than seasoned human programmers can do, which is amazing and bound to get better. So this is an endeavor we didn't think robots could replace, but it looks like they may. The reality also is that artificial intelligence is moving into management. They use it not in the sense of a robot, a physical robot, but in the sense of a computer a system that monitors all the operations of the business and makes recommendations to managers where to allocate their resources, where markets are available, analysis of how things are going. And it's conceivable that as these things get better and better and even more reliable than human managers are, they'll start making decisions directly. So not even managers of companies are immune to this wave. Intelligent robots can replace them. And it makes sense that they replace them if they're better than humans, because the stockholders want the biggest return. Companies that do this will outperform companies that don't. So in today's world, where profit drives incentives, the case for making use of intelligent machines is overwhelming. You don't want to be bypassed. You don't want to make decisions that are inferior. So you invest in AI. Companies are spending big money on AI research. And they're doing it in a selfish manner. The AI they're interested in is determined by the needs of the company. The flow of money produces ownership of the ideas and the mechanisms and the methods to get these AI machines to work. One example of that, the ChatGPT, I got online and started talking to it, and one of my questions to it was, how do you work? What is the algorithm behind you? And it literally told me that OpenAI owns the rights to this, and you'll need to go to OpenAI, look at their literature. So it won't even talk to me about how it's built, because OpenAI owns the rights to how ChatGPT works. So robots will surpass humans in even just thinking about things. This goes into other areas. For example, they think about mathematical proofs. They'll be better mathematicians than we are, I think, eventually. They'll be better medicine doctors, companies that produce drugs. In fact, they're simulating now how molecules can be created that perform very specific functions in the human body. So they'll be better at thinking about medicine than humans do. And areas like philosophy, ethics, etc., are not immune to this, because you can train them. You can train them with data about how humans think of philosophy, how humans think about ethics, and they become better at it. They become like a human that is able to encompass all of that information, integrate it, and have an opinion about it in a manner that's very easy for them. So they can contemplate human philosophy. They can contemplate human ethics and conscience, and they can have opinions about it if we train them to have opinions about it. So eventually scientists that don't make use of artificial intelligence will fall behind in the competition for scientific eminence. So artificial intelligence will always find a place in the purely mental aspects of human existence. They'll be better tools for scientists, and then they'll be able to take over from scientists if we keep giving them agency, that is, an ability to think for themselves. So universities are spending big money on AI research as well, mainly for the kudos, but because it's needed. Because if you don't do this, you will lag. Robots, intelligent robots, will eventually be able to surpass humans in all endeavors. And this includes things like imagination. So they'll be able to imagine new endeavors that didn't even occur to us that we should pursue. And those would be good endeavors. I mean, they're better, so therefore, by definition, these would be endeavors that are better, and therefore we ought to contemplate them. And we have no idea at some point how they're thinking to arrive at these decisions, at these recommendations. So we can't even follow how they came up with these endeavors that we should pursue. They might even at some point not even realize the value of these endeavors. What this leads to is an encroaching of artificial intelligence into politics, because in our society, in our world, endeavors are governed by politics. That's how we decide what is important in the future, how we will go about getting there. The decision to deal with global warming is a political decision. So AI right now is being used in the public sector, and it's used for simple things, quality control, workforce management, whatever, but it's there and it's growing. And eventually, we'll have robots that have been trained on human decision-making at a political level, and they will be sitting there contemplating what else should we be doing. They might think global warming is a good idea. Now, these items I have on here are all things that we know about: disarmament, population control, visiting other planets. Some we don't like one-child policy, but robots may think, oh, that's a great idea, and we ought to do that. And who knows what else they'll come up with, and then what else after that. And furthermore, who knows when we should do that, and they may be thinking about stuff that should be started 100 years from now. And more importantly, they'll be wondering, how do we do these? In other words, they're thinking about us, and they're thinking about these endeavors in the future, and then how to place us such that we will work on these endeavors in the future. And And this is only possible if we give them agency. In other words, they become independent agents whose actions affect the environment, and from the environment they make observations and they contemplate their past experiences, and they have abilities, prior knowledge, and they have goals and preferences. Now that's key. These things are thinking with goals and preferences, and we have trained them to these goals and preferences. The problem is when agents start contemplating creating other artificial agents with their goals and preferences because that is the right thing to do to pursue an endeavor that we might have to start 100 years from now, maybe going to the other stars, for example, we lose track of what those goals are. So this is the danger point, that you train them to the point where they start contemplating their own goals, or goals that in the beginning are focused on working on what humanity should be doing next, but then move on to other things. Maybe humanity needs to move to other stars. Like, they never asked, but that's what they think we should be working on. So, problem is that achieving agency, as described by that diagram on the right, is a thing they're working on today. And it gives researchers bragging rights if you come up with a robot that acts and thinks and behaves like a human being. So it will be developed if allowed. And that's probably something we should be cognizant of, and from my point of view, be worried about. And because of that, because they can be trained on the large set of information that's available about humans, robots eventually will become to understand us better than we understand ourselves, including our weaknesses. And the big source of data for this is social media. Robots can be trained to learn from social media and contemplate, how do I manipulate humans to achieve a desirable goal? Now, this is already happening because social media gives companies deep understanding of what it takes to manipulate people to buy their products. So they're perfecting these machines now. They want machines that can manipulate us without insulting us, bothering us, annoying us. They manipulate us to produce more pleasure in us. So from a company's point of view, they'd call this a desirable goal. What we're doing is good for people because we connect people to things that they desire, that extra boat that we want them to buy, etc. This should scare us because they're being trained with insights in a manner that I don't think any single human being can understand. What is available in social media for them. And furthermore, a concept that's all the way around is that if you build a person, a robot that behaves like a person, and if that person is smart enough to have behaviors and emotions that would, for example, allow it to manipulate you, maybe to allow it to exist, to allow it to continue to exist, to allow it to pursue other goals, they understand what behaviors and emotions they need to exhibit to seduce us into liking them or even loving them. I mean, classically, there's movies that talk about this, robots that you end up loving. And beautiful bodies are not required for this because people can still fall in love even with social media acquaintances we have never met, just by talking to them, just by texting to them, because they understand us well enough to manipulate us because they've learned that from years and years of social media over billions of people. So, sounds pretty depressing if it really does happen. And I repeat, I don't know when it'll happen, but I think we are redeemed, and we are redeemed by having time to guide the development of robots. And we are redeemed by the fact that robots that don't have agency can be and are very useful. Agency is not the secret sauce that we have to add to robots to make them useful. They're still useful without agency. So we have time. We have time to look at desirability, feasibility, viability, and keep doing that. And what we do with that is come up with rules. Now, what are the rules? The rules are rules that guide the development of robots. Right now, it's the Wild West. Any company can devote as much money as it wants to artificial intelligence research, and I don't think there are many rules at all. And I think that's a mistake. I think we need to look at desirability, feasibility, viability, desirability, feasibility, viability, and think hard about that to see what kind of rules we want to put in. Now, to put in a set of rules, you have to have a set of goals that we meet with those rules. And so I talk about that. One of them is to contemplate why we have robots with agency. And I think one of those rules that we would impose on us is to say that if we don't understand the reasoning of a robot with agency, we should reject that reasoning, regardless of our deep belief that there's value to that. In other words, a robot that comes up with a conclusion and we don't understand why it's doing that, we should reject that. That's just a rule on us. And that is something we should accept. We won't be following the optimum path, but it's what we want to do. And it's because one of our goals is to assert that we are endowed with self-determination. We ourselves will choose our own destiny regardless of the opinions of robots. So we have to be able to ignore the opinions of robots, even though a lot of people are screaming that their opinions are better than ours. Who cares? It's our destiny. So robots may point us to a destiny. Humans may think the other destiny is better, and we will choose the human selected destiny. Now, we need mechanisms in place for humans to express the destiny they want. And those mechanisms are what have to be built into the system. It's probably a political system, a political process. And furthermore, interestingly, with AI, we can assist that because augmented AI that is not self-aware, these are just tools that become available to people, will allow them to choose, to cooperate in a manner that allows us to effectively choose our destiny. It doesn't mean we can't listen to robots in the sense that if there's a big problem and they point out the problem and we understand it, we can't change our opinion. There's no way to block people from changing opinions if they understand that something is bad. But the mechanism that we will follow is the mechanism that is human-generated, human-oriented, and not based on opinions from robots. So don't let the robots choose our destiny, regardless of how much perceived value there is in their ideas by the experts. Also, we should resolve that we will appropriate all endeavors that we choose to labor for, including imagining of new endeavors worthy of our attention. In other words, there are things we want to do, even if robots can do them better. And one of the most important is the imagining of new endeavors worthy of our attention. We want to take that, drag it into our domain, and not let robots do it. So the world can head towards a future in which every task is better performed by a robot, and we let the robots do it because they do it better, every possible task. I don't see a place for humans in that universe. We need to carve out tasks that are concerning to us. Tasks that ought to be driven by our nature and our future, and including the limits on our understanding of the future. And those tasks are not available to the robots, and the robots are left with mundane tasks that have to do with increasing prosperity. They produce all the wealth, all the material goods, all the ideas that we ask them to think about, they become the perfect mathematician, and that just becomes a little tool that a human mathematician holds if a human mathematician is interested in that endeavor. So of all the tasks, a lot of them will be mundane. You won't ever have to put a sandwich together. A robot can always put a sandwich together better than you, and that's fine. But if it's thinking about your future, where you want to live, etc., it ought to be a human task. A human task done by humans. In fact, one of the tasks is the task of determining our destiny, one of the most important tasks. Now, how do you do that? You put together a political system that relies on humans, augmented humans maybe, to carve out that task and not let the robots contemplate that task. In fact, one of the tasks I think we should take over is the task of determining robot destiny. We don't want robots considering their future and what their destiny is. Again, just from the get-go, you just never design them that way. You never train them that way. You leave those tasks to humans. And again, the way to do that is to improve the way we cooperate, we come to decisions, etc. And that could be helped by machines. But it's humans doing it. And those are things we don't leave to machines where they can run forward, think a lot about it in a much more efficient manner than we are. Who cares? Who cares? We want to do it ourselves. Part of this is the development of robots needs to be for the good of humanity as judged exclusively by humanity. And humanity needs to be free of the influence of robots, hidden or not. So none of this thing where robots understand us better than us, understands our weaknesses, and has the agency, the will, the desire to manipulate us. There should never be a machine out there that has a desire like that of its own. There should never be a machine there that has a goal that influences people. And that needs to be exclusively human. Furthermore, there are some corollaries here that are important. All the fruits of robots needs to be at the disposal of all of humanity. In the time of robots, they'll be able to produce anything. They'll be able to produce an abundance of everything, as sandwiches won't cost anything, really, because robots do everything, from the farming to the making of the sandwich. And that won't be worth anything if that is confined to the owners of the robots. So the fruits of robots will not be confined by ownership to a subset of humanity, nor will it be rationed based on human merit or human wealth. Wealth cannot be a factor in deciding who gets the benefit of robots. Now, I'm not saying abolish wealth. Humans can have wealth, and they can differentiate themselves with wealth, but they can't monopolize with wealth the benefits of robots, and that'll have to be a rule, one of the rules. So robots produce the wealth, but the wealth goes to all of humanity. And the development of robots needs to be funded and proceed under strict controls to achieve the goals of this manifesto. In other words, we can't leave it to a Wild West world in which companies on their own fund these things and proceed under their own rules. Our political system needs to look at this and come up with rules that govern this development, because this development is so dangerous. You'd never let companies go off and try to discover how to make atom bombs. I just don't think the political system would allow them. And once we understand the danger from robots that have agency and opinions and start planning beyond anything we can plan, we've lost control. So we can't let that happen. Now, we can't let that happen doesn't mean we don't recognize it is possible to do that, but not everything that's possible is something that we should do. Because we know how to build a bomb that can destroy the whole planet, we should not just automatically do that to prove that we can build one. Robots that developed that can take over humanity is possible. It does not mean we should build such robots. It does not mean we should allow others to build such robots. And certainly does not mean we should allow companies to build robots that can manipulate us. So, I also think robots should never be gifted with this agency. Agency means an ability to contemplate, like a human does, their own existence, the existence of humans, come up with motives on their own. Now, maybe in pursuit of something that humans think is important, but it's their own motives and their ability to plan around it. And therefore, robots will never be persons. I mean, robots can talk to you, robots can answer questions. Robots, when asked, are you wondering if you're alive? Robots shouldn't be able to even answer that. There is no little circuit in the robot's training that is spinning there wondering about its existence, just because we never build them that way. Okay, we can, but we don't. Robots shall not be developed with opinions or values of their own. They're just tools. You would never build a screwdriver that has an opinion of its own about whether it's being used correctly or not. You just don't. So we don't build robots that we fall in love with. It's wrong. And that's part of the rules. Robot development will be focused on expanding human abilities rather than developing agency or personhood. Now, we don't want to give up the benefits of robots. So robots that do mundane tasks, we build them, but they're not thinking about the mundane tasks. They're just built to do those tasks. Humans will require enhanced abilities. So we can think about augmenting humans with human augmentation devices so that they become smarter, they have access to more information, they can talk to each other faster, they can learn faster, etc. And that certainly can have artificial intelligence in it. So human augmentation devices that are AI is fine because the purpose is to augment humans. None of this creating another person out of a robot. Why? So humans chooses to monopolize the endeavor to determine its own destiny, and robots will never be allowed to contemplate human destiny. So our position from the get-go ought to be, it's none of their business. So we need to look at what allows them to contemplate. And if it's possible that that could lead to them contemplating our destiny, we stop it using rules. So don't let robots choose your destiny, regardless of how much value there is that we think. So why even give them agency? I don't think we should even give robots agency. It should not be okay to build a robot that can pretend to be a human to such a degree that a human can't tell it's a robot. Why? I mean, that's just an exercise that's kind of fun, but why build this device that's so dangerous? Don't. I mean, don't even allow them to contemplate their own destiny, let alone human destiny. It's none of their business what their own destiny is. Don't ever allow it to happen where robots are concerned with their own destiny. Anyway, in conclusion, to further these truths, we will be living in a world that is surrounded by gods. Essentially, these robots know more than us, more capable than us, but we carve out a space. In that space, we have to be relevant. Why will we be relevant? Because we're working on something important. What is that? It is human endeavors. It is, for example, what is our future? How do we talk to each other? What is our political system? These are all human endeavors that are important to humans, and humans are capable of designing these, modifying them, and evolving them in a manner consistent with human ignorance, human limitations. That's fine. It lets us live in this space with a life that is of our own choosing, and with liberty from the tyranny of all-powerful godlike entities, and it'll give us happiness that labor is for the good of humanity, because it's important. Furthermore, it's rewarded. Now, what do I mean by that? That means if you participate in a parliamentary system making decisions, you get a salary. If you're participating in research that investigates how social dynamics fragment humanity or social dynamics unite humanities. You're a scientist that's working on something that a robot could probably do better and faster than you. Now, you can use augmentation to think about that, but you're the one doing that as a human, and you are receiving a salary for doing this. Now, we're talking about a world in which there's a ton of abundance. So salary might be just something that buys you prestige, buys you a location on a cliff looking at a beautiful view. Humans become differentiated by how wealthy they are, and their wealth is received from contributing to this project, contributing to life, to liberty, to happiness, and to dignity, where we live with dignity, understanding that we control our manifest destiny. We've chosen it. There are examples of this in history. British aristocracy didn't have to do any work for centuries. They did not have to do any work. And they thrived. They thrived because members of the aristocracy could be lazy, but they could be brilliant. A lot of the scientists came out of the aristocracy because they just chose to think about it. There was no reason for them to. They had money. Why think about gravity or whatever endeavor a lot of these people of leisure at the time would think about? I conceive of humanity as being in that state where our values are different than they are today. The value is not in making a car. The value is in contemplating and informing other humans of what ought to come after the car, what ought to come next for humanity. Another example, which I think is very interesting, is the human brain is made out of layers in the neocortex, which is the newest part of the brain that can process information to a degree way beyond anything that is in the more simpler ancestors to humans. They draw conclusions, they form models, they model the universe and look at exceptions, etc. But at the top of that pyramid, my understanding is that the neurons do a deep dive to the old part of the brain, which is the lizard brain, which governs emotions having to do with existential truths, flight, fear, reproduction, happiness. Those emotions are not logical. They are built into this ad hoc machine, which is the lizard brain, and they drive this other part of the brain, which is the majority of the brain, which is the neocortex, that can reason about the world. That's how we need to be with these machines. They can do a lot more than us, but they have no interest in doing anything for their own purposes. Their whole purpose in life is to become servants of us, and we use our primitive brains, our primitive abilities, to decide in human terms what we want as humans. Thank you.